Brothers Show. The Brothers Show. The Brothers Show. Tonight.
All right. Hello, everybody. Welcome back again to the Brothers Show. It's good to have you here with us. We're going to do what we've been doing all week, having some fun hanging out here with members of our congregation, with disciples from around the country, and our special guest tonight, coming all the way from Atlanta, Georgia, Kit Cummings. Kit is the president of Power of Peace and a very good friend of mine. Kit, how's it going over there in Atlanta?
Doing good. It's late out here on the East Coast. It's good to be with you, Steve. It's been a minute.
It has been a little while. You keep looking. If you shaved that little white beard off, you'd look as young as you did when I met you a million years ago. But and you're sporting colors. I see you're proud of the Atlanta Falcons, huh? Is that
Hey, no, I'm loyal. 55 years in this city. It's my town.
There you go. Well, that's really good. What's life like for you? You travel a whole lot usually. And of course, one of the things we'll get into talking about tonight is you're in and out of jail all the time. You're in and out of prisons, and of course, that's one of the things that we've been hearing a lot about in the news, and how the virus is affecting folks in jail, folks in prison, those kinds of things. But first of all, what's life like for you these days, and maybe even how that compares to what you're usually doing?
Man, it's a night and day difference. I've been for this last, decade, that this crazy ride that I've been on since God gave me this ministry. Really, it's been 12 years, but 10 years going crazy. It's just been, I love it. I work real hard because I love what I do, but I'm always out there. And so whether it's speaking in prisons or schools, I do some corporate gigs, a lot of stuff with kids. And yeah, I'm doing more preaching nowadays. And it's all live audiences and it's all live energy. And I love it. I'm on the road a pretty good bit. And now all of a sudden, we quarantined right when they told us to. My wife and I really got on it. And it's been great. But I think the way God's used it for me is he had to sit me down for a minute, because there's a lot of stuff that I'm developing now, like a lot of people are, using technology. I mean, Zoom stock has gone through the roof. Everybody's having to learn to connect in these new ways. And I mean, I've got a manuscript deadline with my publisher, and I just keep putting it off because I just been, hair on fire. And this has got me sitting down, developing content, writing the book, blasting, doing more stuff, using social media. And so, God's working, but it's a huge shift for me.
I would imagine so. I know I try to keep up with you on the different forms of social media. You're pretty good with social media, right? I mean, it's not hard to try to keep up with you. We were talking to Michael Burns and last night, and Mike Tolliver says that Michael Burns is like the Where's Waldo game. Where's Michael Burns? He's preaching here and preaching there. You're the same way usually, and so I try to keep up with you from all the different places you're going. But tell us a little bit about the Power of Peace. Let's go ahead and get into that, and about the Power of Peace, and what happened that got you into it in the first place.
Yeah, I appreciate it. I bet it was close to when this thing started kind of moving a little bit, that you invited me out and I got to know your congregation. I think 2 visits I came out there and got to preach and spend time with you, but it was pretty early on. But what led to it, I got out of the full-time ministry in 2003. And that was after, I think that was my 15th year in, and I just ran out of gas and I just burnt out. And so, when things were going the way they were going, it was just time for me to take a break. And so I walked away, but I was pretty beat up when I resigned, and then just went into a whirlwind. And that was my time of testing, my wilderness experience. And that was 2004. And the wheels fell off and, life happened. And so I went through my storm, and I would come out of it really kind of, I would say, beaten into a state of reasonableness is where I was at. And really just trying to figure out God all over again. Because the way that I had, I mean, it was a great ride. And there's no way, I praise God for everything that he did from 1989 all the way up to 2003. And the amazing things that we saw together, the places we went together, what we learned together, and the way we changed the world together. And for me, I just burnt out. And so when I came back in, and basically back into the fight is what I'm talking about, went through a divorce. That was very, very hard. My kids were pretty young, got through that and fell in love and was remarried in 2006. I'm very open about the fact that my family line and my journey has alcoholism running all through it. And I lost my father, when I was in college to that disease. Well, it chased me around for a while. In the ministry, I would always kind of keep it at bay, keep it at bay. And there were times that were really good, and there was times that I struggled. But it became a secret battle. The last couple of years of my ministry, man, I was losing heart, and I was just really, my foundation was crumbling. And so when I came through it sober in 2005, I had my last drink, was remarried in 2006. And for that time that I was out there, from getting out of the ministry to when I would find this dream, I had to hustle. And so I was in mortgage banking. Imagine me as a mortgage banker. I mean, that was me.
I can imagine you doing a lot of things.
Yeah, back then I didn't have, my sleeves and
you're well, that fits in. I don't think I've met a mortgage banker in Portland that doesn't have sleeves. I don't think I've met anyone in Portland that doesn't have tats.
That's right. That's right.
But no, you're incredibly talented. But so you were mortgage banking for a while.
I was the worst mortgage banker of all time. The banker that, isn't very good at math. It's like not a good profession. So then I jump out of that, and I'm trying insurance, and it's like, man, that was terrible. And it turns out I'm not really great at that either. And then I get into some real estate, start doing some things. And that's, I'm figuring out a way to support my family, but I'm absolutely miserable because I couldn't preach anymore. And that was all that I ever did found that I loved, and nothing else was even close in any other jobs I had or little career stops. And so, really, I believed that those days were behind me, and I thought that I had been disqualified, and rightly so. I'm like, yeah, I mean, I was a knucklehead when I went out there and I left. Man, I went hard. I mean, I went out there and just tore some things up, and I was on a dangerous ride. And God, the way I put it now is he stalked me. I mean, really, I ran as fast as I could trying to get away from him. He was faster. Man, I backed up and tried to I back away, slide away, whatever. And he kept.
You're talking about after 2003 when you came out?
Yeah, 2004 was my.
Is it okay? And if not, is it, when you talk about God stalking you, I know you shared it with the congregation here about going into the bar.
You
and the guy, you know what I'm talking about?
Oh yeah, let's just go there, Steve. Let's just go right there.
Go straight to it. Because this is God stalking you, right?
Yeah. All right. So this is right at the end. Okay. So luckily it was like a wild year of me throwing a tantrum and saying, hey, I'm not going to talk to you. I'm not going to read your book. I don't want to see any of your people. And I'm going to go to places I know y'all aren't. And so I was mad. I was mad at God. I was mad at y'all. I was mad at everybody. But really, it turns out I was just really mad at me. And so anyway, yeah, I was hanging out in bars and clubs, and, I was, there was a lot of stories going around, a lot of them deserved. And it was a hot topic. And so I kind of went dark. And so I'm in a bar real late at night, like closing the place down. And I'm just wrecked. At this point, man, I'm in so much pain. I'm drinking just to stop the pain. I mean, I'd lost everything. And so, I closed the place down. Lights come on, and I'm not in a good way. And I don't know that I had ever been recognized in one of those places. I might have, but I never saw that I was. But I was, I've been in Atlanta all my life, and I've been in the public, type of a profession for half of my life. And so anyway, I'm staggering out of this place, And all of a sudden I hear somebody say, "Big Kit." And I was like, oh man, it's like, is it a brother? What's a brother doing in here? And so I look down and I don't recognize him, never seen whoever this man is. And so I said, I look at him and he's laughing. He's laughing at me, because I'm in this club. I'm very drunk. And so I look at him and I said, "Who are you?" And he looked up at me he didn't smile, he didn't laugh. He looked up at me with this weird grin on his face and he said, "Beelzebub." And I was like, it just kind of shook me. But I was in no shape for that. So I poked Beelzebub in the chest and I cussed him and I staggered out of there. So I'm going to get in my car. And this is, my story is, in my drinking days along the line of my life, I'm a chronic drunk driver. And the end of my story was going to be a traffic accident. I was going to either take a life or lose my life. And this night, man, now I'm confused. I got out and I got in my car and I started heading up the highway, and I had a pretty good ways to go. I don't know how I made it as long as I did, but finally I just passed out and I slumped to the right and my car took off and I hit a guardrail. Now I've been back to this place. I'm telling you, this is my road to Damascus. And there's a guardrail and there's no other guardrails all along this stretch. There's just this one. And on the other side of it is just ravine and oak trees and just death, probably 15, 20 foot. And so, I just at the right time, boom, I hit that thing. My car is all smashed up. I'm kind of beat up. It's 3:00 in the morning. And I get out on the road and I'm kind of confused. And all of a sudden, blue lights, cop car pulls in. And he gets me off the road and he asks for my license. I guess I gave it to him. He puts me in the front seat with no cuffs, okay, which is horrible police work. And so I'm in the front seat of a cop car without handcuffs on. He gets in, I pass out. And so now I'm passed out in the front of a police car. And the next thing I know, I'm gently being woken up and I'm at my driveway. And he's taking me to my house. He opens the door, he helps me out, and he lets me go. I didn't even get a ticket. And I went in and, that's horrible police work. If something horrible happens, but this is what was happening. And so the next day I get up and I don't know what's going on. My car's not there. And I get a call and it's the collision center. And I said, "We got your car, Mr. Cummings." And I said, "How'd you get it?" And they said, "An officer called it in and had it towed." Now, to this day, I don't know who that was. And I don't know why he did it. The only way I can figure it is I met the devil in a club and an angel drove me home that night. And I believe that, how else do you explain that? Because if my life that night, if he does what he should have done, which is lock me up, maybe I go dark and I don't come back. So this was when God was saying, "All right, boy, it's time, it's getting ready to get real bad." And that was when, I kind of woke up.
Well,
Great story.
that's a good story. And I know that was a huge turning point for you. And I just got to say, because I remember you before, and I know that it's very transparent of you to share your struggle, your roots, the problems with alcoholism, and that all of us have something. I remember, though, even during that time, you were always one of the most talented. Of course, then I was old then. I was starting to get old then, and you were one of the young guys. And I remember, the times I'd visit down there and see you, or we'd have you come up to New York and meet some of the folks up there and stuff. You just always stood out as someone that was going to do something one way or the other. I always thought it would be something good, and of course, I never had any idea the hell you were going to go through to get where you are. And I believe that it's certainly made you the kind of person with character that's doing something that few other people are really doing. And that maybe does sort of set us up. You could have gone dark, but instead of going dark, you turned to the light. You have been devoted to the Lord, and you started this Power of Peace thing. How in the world did you ever? And I'll go ahead and say, I'll give this much for the people that don't even know what Power of Peace is. I'm not sure where you've been, but Kit goes into prisons and is getting gang members to become friends, right? I mean, to make peace with one another. And you started this a few years ago, and it's groundbreaking work. It's major stuff. Whatever possessed you to start that?
Well, I never there. It's not possible. I couldn't have come up with it. It's such a crazy thing, but it makes so much sense when you look back. Like when you're going through something, it's so hard sometimes to see God in it, and like, why are you letting this happen? And then if you just keep just even if it gets ugly, especially when it gets ugly, you keep on following Him, and you don't quit, and He keeps His hands around you. When you get through that and you look back, it's like you can see Him clearly, hindsight. And so with me, I don't know what was going to get me back because I thought I couldn't preach anymore. And, churches weren't really looking to hire a drunken fallen preacher. And so, nobody's blowing up my phone. And I understood it. And so I was like, well, okay. So when I came back after my tantrum, all right, my first prayer was, leave me alone. I mean, I don't want to talk to you. I don't want to hear from you. If you want to be merciful, then fine. But just, I'm out. And I was very honest with him. I wasn't going to be a hypocrite. I wasn't going to go find another church and act like I wasn't going to do that. And so I just went the other way. Well, I came back and I looked up those same stars and I said, okay, I'm ready to talk again. And I basically, these were the two most significant prayers of my life, when I threw a tantrum and yelled at him and told him I didn't want him anymore. And then when I came back, the prodigal son, and just make me a hired hand. Please just let me come back on the ranch. And he did what he does. He just loved me. He loved me even more. And man, I understood God's grace in a whole way. I'd preached so many sermons about grace and didn't understand it. And so, but I needed a passion, a purpose, and it was a kingdom kid. In the last church that I was leading up in Gwinnett, part of around Atlanta, a couple thousand people. And that's when I stepped down. And there was this kid, and I loved him to death, a beautiful Hispanic young man. And he was a little bigger than his friends, big brown eyes, big smile. He'd wait in line to come up and shake my hand. Mr. Kit, this is what I learned today. And I became like his big brother. Well, I went off to lead up or go somewhere else, and I lost him. And 10 years later, he's grown, he's 25. His mom reaches out to me and says, will you go see Luis? And I said, yeah, I'd love to. Where's he at? Well, he's locked up. And he was looking at a death penalty case, what would become a death penalty case, because he joined a gang after I lost him. And anybody that's familiar with the gang world, it's MS-13. And MS-13 is the most dangerous gang in the world. You got ISIS, Al-Qaeda, MS-13. And he became somebody in that world. And now he's caught up in fighting for his life. And his mom calls me, and I just go because he's my buddy. And I'm expecting to see this little boy walk out, and this great big man tatted up just walks out, and he looks at me and his eyes look like they had died. But he saw me, and his face, that big smile came back again, and we hugged. And for 2 years, I went and saw him every week, and I studied the Bible with him through the glass, and he taught me about the gang life. I mean, he gave me stuff that you cannot learn any other way. There's no way you learn about MS-13, but he taught me everything, and I taught him the Bible. And I had told God I wasn't going to read it anymore. And so he got me every week I was teaching my friend. Well, he got baptized on Cinco de Mayo on the other side of the glass. I'm on a phone. Do you believe that Jesus died for you? And he's like, are you willing to die for Jesus? He's on the other end of the phone. He said, I've been willing to die for my gang every day. I'll die for him. And I mean, it was like magic. And I'm seeing this miracle happen. And I don't know that God has just trained me into what he's about to launch me into, because I get an invitation to go to a prison in Georgia, and it happens to be the worst prison in the state of Georgia, most violent, most gang members. But I was so excited about what I'd seen God do with Luis that I couldn't wait to get in there and meet some of them. And so God had opened my heart to this very scary world. But I went in there, man, just trying to make friends, and I did. And that led to this thing that's taken me to prisons across the country, prisons in South Africa, and Ukraine, and Mexico, and Honduras. And just this thing has taken me, and my whole ministry became the incarcerated. And it changed my life, because the least of these, you think about the hungry, the thirsty, the sick, the naked, the stranger, and the thirsty. Did I say thirsty? All of them are the inmate. They're sick. They're a stranger. They're naked. They don't have their own clothes. They're hungry. They're thirsty, and they're a prisoner. They're in cage. And so they became my ministry and my heart. I've had 3 friends executed on death row that were my friends. And these are, I mean, grace really became amazing to me, because I would see these brothers of mine and they love so hard. I mean, they're not what you think they are. And some of them are, gosh, there's men in there that are better men than me. And so they became my friends, and we became a band of brothers, and we started, this peace movement in a crazy prison, and it spread to where, I mean, we've done these peace movements, and Crips and Bloods come together, and Black militant Muslims and Aryan Brotherhood come together. It's just the craziest thing you've ever seen.
Tell us about that. Tell us about Black Muslim and Aryans. How does, I mean, I know Jesus can do anything. And I won't say a lot. For me, it's prison, something you watch shows on TV or in movies, and those guys, they can't come together.
Yeah.
How's that happen?
It got to be, it was a process. I mean, you kind of stumbled into it and started thinking things. And then I had this small little group on Tuesdays. And I did have guys. I had a Crip in there, had a couple Bloods. There was kind of the Nazi guy. You had the Gangster Disciples and the Latin Kings. And so we had the right players, but it was in a faith and character-based dorm. So they're all guys in there that are trying to be better, but they're still kind of, so they weren't like beefing all the time. But out in the rest of the prison, it was on fire. I mean, they had bodies. There was people getting killed. And so, but I had my place with my guys. And so we tried an experiment, and the warden said that I could do it, but he said, you can only do it in that class. We're not ready to do this. And actually it was at a Hope conference. I went and spoke for Antonio Boyd in Philadelphia in 2010 and about the prison ministry. And that's where I had the idea. At 2:00 on the 5th. I remember that, December the 5th. And on the way back, I was like, man, we're going to start a peace movement in this prison. And I just thought the warden was going to love it. Well, he thought I was crazy. And he said, but teach what you want to your little class on Tuesdays. And so on January the 18th, 2011, my 12 guys, it turned out it was 12, it was perfect. They signed the peace pledge, and to see if they could live in peace for 40 days. Just 40 days in a row. Well, I told them to keep it on the down low, but they wouldn't. They wouldn't start telling everybody. And so then everybody wanted to be a part of it. So I had 2 guys that were very connected, and they went out and started bringing gang leaders to me saying, hey man, this is Chain Gang. He wants to be a part. And then they'd bring other guys. And so the warden came to me. He was actually kind of ticked. And he's like, I told you not to do this. And I said, I didn't do it. They went out and started spreading the good news. And so he said, you've got to manage it. And I said, what's that look like? And he said, well, I'm not going to let my officers do it, and the brothers aren't going to do it. You've got to do it. So it was kind of like if something went wrong, I was the fall guy. And so he'd let me get with this group of gang leaders in the small chapel every Friday morning. And we had all the major players represented, no guards in the room. Just we're in there and we're just like chopping it up. It's kind of like if you have all your Bible talk leaders together, and you're trying to figure, hey, how's it going, Bob? How's your ministry going? Or Sue, how's that? How's that thing? How's their marriage? Is everything good? Whatever. You know how you do that. Well, I was trained to do that. Well, fast forward to 2010, and I'm in a circle with, Crips and Bloods and GDs, and it's a different kind of D group. So I'd say, all right, let's talk about what's going on this week. And, hand goes up. I'm like, yeah, day. And he said, and I quote, yeah, this week in D2, we had a brother, and he was wrapped up in a sheet, tied up and set on fire and thrown off the tier. What should we do about that? And I'm like, now inside, I'm like, good Lord. Outside, I'm like, well, how about if we, okay, first of all, no burnings this week. Everybody good with that? We started going back and forth, and it was kind of like we started working together, because I would ask them, I've asked this all over the place in all these crazy prisons. Raise your hand if you want to do hard time. None of them raise their hand. Nobody wants to do hard time. And I said, okay, raise your hand if you want your little brother, your son to come here. Nobody raised their hand. Raise your hand if you feel like you know something's about to pop off before it happens. All their hands go up. I said, now, most importantly, raise your hand if collectively you guys could put everything down if you really, really had a good enough reason. And every hand goes up. And so we just kind of build consensus and say, okay, if I can give you a big enough why, what's in it for you, will you help me? Because if y'all start working together and lowering the violence, I will help you have a better life. Give me leverage so I can go back to the warden and say, hey, why don't we reward these guys, man? Violence just dropped, almost went away in this first prison. And that prison won Prison of the Year that year in the state of Georgia. And Power Peace now was off and running because those brothers did all the hard work. I just got to witness the miracle.
They have a Prison of the Year award.
Yeah, we got it. It's like a ring, baby. Give me a ring. So then once that word got out, well, then some warden up in Michigan, they were having problems where guys were getting cut. I don't tell you, but they were having a lot of problems with these gang initiations and recruiting things. And so I get invited there. Well, now I've got a little bit of a template. And so I went there and I said, listen, I need the leaders. I need guys, just tell them to come out one day and I'm going to lay it out. If they want to be a part, then they can. And I wrote the first book, 40 Days of Peace. And it was, they study Gandhi and King and Mandela, the great ones. They learn quotes every day. We do action challenges. They wear wristbands. So when they see their rival with the wristband, it's like, oh man, those guys are both on their peace plan. And so violence starts to come down. And once the leaders come together, and you can see it at every prison, they start to come together and they realize, hey, if we start getting along, everybody wins. They quit shaking us down so much. We're not getting sent to the hole. The officers aren't beating on us. We have a better quality of life. All we got to do is learn to resolve conflict the right way. And I don't know, magic happened. And so then it's like the next prison wanted it. And so we had a prison in Michigan that violence dropped 50% over 2 years when we were doing this thing. And we ran 2,000 inmates through the program. I mean, it's been pretty crazy.
How many prisons are you tied in with now?
Right now, on a regular, none. I mean, right before this pandemic, I had one here in Georgia, and that was by design because basically I could have kept running around doing prisons and that would have been a great thing. But it impacts the brothers that are in there, which is great. And then they get out and I'm sure a lot of them don't come back. But as far as impacting the whole world, man, we got to stop the kids from going to prison or killing themselves, and the problem we're having with our kids. So I came up with a 40-day program for kids. And then that one blew up in the schools, kind of like the prison thing did. And so it was hard, but I made a decision. I had to scale back the prisons and I had to really just start working with the kids.
Well, tell us about that. What's going on there?
So this is so cool because when I would do a new prison, like for instance, I did one in Ellsworth, Kansas. Okay, it's a little town. They build prisons out in the middle of nowhere. And so when a prison peace movement starts happening, there's all the biggest economic driver in the little town is the prison. They employ hundreds of people, right? So it's a big part of that little town. There's schools there and there's churches there. So I started thinking, okay, every community, you have jails, you have schools, and you have churches. And I called it the dysfunctional triangle because really schools aren't working because they're sending kids to prison. Prison ain't working when they get out. And the churches, a lot of them are just sitting on their hands, not doing anything to help. And so we started trying to engage all of them. Well, the kids, they thought that the prison peace movement was cool because they're all like gangster, everybody, they're hip hop gangster. And so they heard gangsters are becoming peacemakers. And this cool little thing developed where I would go into the brothers behind the wire and I'd say, hey, these kids out here know what you're doing. Do not let them down. You taught me that you don't want your little brothers to come up here. Well, I'm out here doing this for you. And then I would go to the kids and I'd say, hey, those brothers are putting their lives on the line, trying to be role models for you. Do not disappoint them. We got to pull together. So they started kind of strengthening one another. But now when I go into a high school, I'm like, I'll meet with the principal and the athletic director, and they'll say, okay, how does it work? And I'm like, well, in a prison, I want the gang leaders. And I've got a very good plan to how to bring violence down if you give me the right people. So I say, man, give me the quarterback, give me the point guard, give me the class president, give me the drum major, give me the head cheerleader, give me the baseball star, give me the kids that are running things at this school. And we basically do the same thing with the kids that we do with the convicts. We bring these unlikely brothers together, because the marching band and the football players getting together is harder than Crips and Bloods. They're not going to hang. And so we started kind of doing the same thing, but the role models for them were these hero prisoners that are now becoming like the Gandhis and the Kings. And so that gave the brothers a noble purpose. And I wrote a book and they were all in it. And so this thing started to kind of cultivate. So now you've got this base, which becomes what we call the POP Club, the Power of Peace Project, POPP, they call us POP. And so the POP Club is the most influential kids in the school. They come together and we start tackling issues: irresponsible social media, disrespect of authorities, drug and alcohol abuse, objectifying classmates, unhealthy relationships, lowering scholastic standards, and promoting a bullying spirit. I call that the dream killers. And we teach them the power of a big dream. And the bigger the dream, the stronger the pull. And the more valuable a dream is, the more you'll protect it from things that are jamming kids up. And so that's how we started to create movements in schools. And then once one school gets it, then the other schools around want it. It kind of took off from there.
Well, tell us how many schools are doing that now? What's it like?
We've done it in different places, but here in Atlanta, we probably have about a dozen schools right now.
Okay.
Getting schools is the easiest part, but we're trying to figure out how to scale it, because I can't be in, more than one place at one time. And so we're starting a coaching training program where, see, the book is called Protect the Dream, and it's a 40-day curriculum-based project for influencers, for kids.
Mhm.
And so we're trying to bring together the coaches and the teachers with the kids and kind of have like right now, the last prison I was at, Hancock State Prison, it's a maximum security prison. And the movement is carrying on there, even though I can't be there. And so they have their peace council. They're handling real issues. When there's an act of violence, the peace council meets with the warden. They're handling things. And so now the movement is moving without me being there, which is probably the thing that's making me the most happy, the most proud.
And has it gone on in any of the other prisons that you did have a chance to get into before? Is it?
As far as it carrying on?
Yeah.
It depends on the warden. I've had there was 3 prisons in Michigan where it rocked, and it got to where we could do it without me being there. I could come and launch it, and then that thing just move. But then when you lose that warden, it's hard to sustain it. And so when there's a turnover, it's kind of hard.
Yeah.
But those guys, the funny thing is, I've got these several books: 4 Days of Peace, 4 Days of Freedom, 4 Days of Power. And all of them in the early days had my cell phone number on the back. So I've got thousands of books in all these prisons. These convicts have them, and they're getting out. It's like, hey, yo, kid. And I'm like, yeah, who's this? Oh, it's Red Dog, man. We met in Detroit. You told me when I got out I could be a part of this thing. And I'm like, all right, Red Dog, what you want to do? And so it's like this army of inmates. They're getting out and they're wanting to do good stuff. A lot of them.
You can start a gang for Jesus. There you go.
That's what
and
I want.
your focus is completely turned towards the kids, towards the younger ones. And so it's more about prevention as far as prison goes, but it's more about building character and helping people when they're younger realize how to get along with other folks and have dreams. That's pretty amazing stuff. That's pretty amazing.
Really, it's teaching young people the power of compassion. Can you imagine if we had a compassion movement in our high schools? Because what we're doing is we're teaching the bullies, who are the popular kids. I mean, let's face it, in a high school, the popular kids run things. And it's always been that way. And I'll be quite honest, I didn't even realize it until I started doing this work. But I look back now and I go, I was a bully. And it's one of the things that's the hardest for me to say out loud. I can tell you I was drunk in a club and driving drunk and crashing cars, but it's harder for me to say I was a bully, because I was bullied in my home. And so at school, the bullied becomes the bully. And I wasn't a mean kid, but I would laugh at kids. I would ridicule. I did the things that now I'm trying so hard to put an end to. But we're teaching these kids that have such influence. Really, if you've got a huge dream, why are you going to put it at risk? with these things. And then once they start protecting their dream, when they finish the program and they get their certificate, which means something, now we commission them as dream protectors. Okay, so if you're a linebacker and you're a cool guy and you're at a party and all of a sudden there's a girl who's had a little too much to drink and there's a bad little vibe going on, and this might be a very bad night for her, we've taught this kid, hey, you have the influence. You're protecting your dream. You need to protect hers. Go get her friends. Tell them, hey, get her out of here. Protect her dream tonight. And also protect those knuckleheads over there that might do something that they're going to go away for. And so we're just trying to teach them to protect their school in the same way that we taught the inmates how to protect their prison, and own it and protect it.
Oh, well, that's incredible. That makes me very thankful for you. I'm sure you're glad to know you. Why don't we go ahead, Carl? Anybody? Why don't we go ahead and open this up? We've got Kit here with us, and he's got all of this experience. We might want to pick his brain about his thoughts right now on some of the things we talk about and hear about regarding prison reform and the COVID virus in prison, or we can just jump into this talk about working with the younger people. Any questions, anybody? Go ahead.
I just want to commend you, Kit. This is, you've been blessed. You've been given a gift, and how you've organized this whole thing to work with each member of the system is nothing less than amazing. And I know you realize that, you've been given insight to what very few people have, but I think it's tremendous. And I want to just commend you.
I appreciate it. And God loves knuckleheads. I believe that. And I think that, I've always loved Paul's ministry, because his was just a strange ministry. The only time he came to the Holy City was when he was in trouble and they were having a conference about him. And then they tell him what he had to do and send him off. And he was doing things that were out there. But I think he was driven by what he had done and who he was before he met Jesus. And I think it just naturally drove him. And I think God allowed me to go through so much junk, and I just made such a mess that it now is, I don't know, it's the power, it's the mess that became a message, and it kind of just fuels you. That's what grace does. It definitely does. But I appreciate it.
Yeah. Inspiring.
Thank you, man.
Kit, I have a couple of questions from our Facebook stream. Kyle Remington would like to know if you happen to have any apprentices that have begun working up under you in the pop ministry.
We have a great apprentice. We have young people, kind of the pop rock stars, some of these kids, we're a volunteer army. And then we've got wonderful volunteers along the way. We've got some guys that I bring in to do some speaking in the schools. It's very hard to teach somebody how to do the prisons. It's like, that's kind of the special little thing all by itself. But I think in the schools, absolutely. And so, yeah, we've got a guy here in Atlanta that I think is going to be doing some work with us. He's an amazing preacher. He's got an incredible story. He's kind of the package. He's a preacher, very spiritual man, but he came to America in the Cuban crime wave when he was a baby. His family was smuggling cocaine in his diaper bag. So he literally came into that, gangs, prisons, got shot up. And now he's this amazing preacher, and he wants to help with pop. And so, he's a rock star. So I guess that answers the question a little bit.
Yeah, absolutely. Evie also asks, how do you handle the stigma within the church regarding prisoners? It can seem sometimes as though there's a lack of grace for murderers and other criminals, but there's always a way that you can address love towards an individual. Is there a way that we can address as members of the fellowship the lack of love for this population?
God, great. Thank you, Evie. Yeah, that's my heart right there. It's so easy. Judgment and hatred happens from a distance. It's so easy to judge the other if you're not close to them. And it's easy to hate somebody that you're not close to. But when we get very close and personal, and if someone allows you to walk with them so you can see their journey. It's so hard to hate somebody when you've seen their journey. And so, these men have let me walk with them, their fathers, their grandfathers, their sons. Some of them just had a horrible day they can never take back. Some of them, addiction drove them mad and they did something they can't take back. Others, it was mental illness, and then something happened, they can't take it back. Some were systematically abused all the way up, became abusers, and hate themselves for what they do. And so these are just real people, and it's easy to judge prisoners until your son becomes one. That'll change somebody. So those that are in churches judging prisoners, I would say be very careful. Life happens to all of us. If I would have not hit that guardrail, but I would have hit a car, I'd be wearing white with a blue stripe. My head would be shaved and you wouldn't see me anymore. And I would be in there. So would the church be hating on me? So, I mean, anything can put us there, but I just see, these brothers, they're amazing. And nobody ever asks them to help. And so we ask them to help and they become heroes, a lot of them. So I don't know. I can tell one little story, I guess. That was a great question, Evie. But I went into death row in Alabama. And it was the first time I'd been to this death row, but I would go several more times and make friends with a lot of those guys. And so I walk in there the first time I'd been in there, and a guy walked up to me, and it's about 20 guys that are all death row guys, and there's volunteers, and we're having a big function together. And this guy walks up to me, and I guess he knew me, and he said, I want to talk to you, preacher. And I was like, all right, what's your name? And he said, my name's Donald. Well, they call him Psycho. Psycho's has to be a white guy, bald, tattoos on his face, not a lot of teeth. He's real kind of shifty guy, gets way too close to your personal space. That's Psycho. And so he's like, I said, what can I do for you, Donald? He goes, no, I don't want to talk here. I want to talk over there. And I was like, okay. So I follow Psycho, the double murderer, over to a place of his choosing. And now we're up under a staircase. And so the first chapter of one of my books is Psycho Under the Stairs. It's this story. And so I'm under the stairs. It's dark. I'm looking around to see if, any of the witnesses can see me. And he's like way close to me. I can smell his breath. And he goes, so I got a question for you, preacher. And I said, what can I do for you? And he said, I want to get right before they take me. He said, what I did it. And what I got coming to me, I deserve it. And I got a question. And his eyes began to fill, and tears fell over his teared out tattoos. And he said, and he's quivering, and he said, can your God save a man like me? Well, now I'm crying, man. And it was this answer just leapt out of me. It wasn't like I had to figure out, do I have a study for this one? Did they teach me this in seminary? How do I help this guy? It was like the most simple, powerful question. Can your God save a man like me? Because I just told you what I did. And I said, yes. And I'm crying, he's crying. And he said, how do you know? Like he had to know. Why are you so confident? I don't think I can be saved. And I said, because he saved a drunken fallen preacher like me. And now we're hugging. If you guys come to see me in Atlanta and I take you to my office up on the square, it's adorned with all these beautiful little presents and gifts and crafts that these men from these prisons all over have made because we're friends. And I've got a great big jewelry box that Psycho, Brother Donald, made for me on death row. And it's one of my prized possessions. But I say to the churches that have a hard time getting their hands wrapped around this, I'm like, how amazing is God's grace? Is it amazing just for some of us, just for those of us who deserve it? Or is it for Donald on death row? I mean, that's amazing grace to me. And so that changed my whole life about judging who's in and who's out and who deserves it, and who doesn't. And I can't see it like that anymore.
Amen. Thank you. There's one more question if there's time. This one comes from Matthew Morris. He asks, what are things that you've seen in prisons or schools with the members of your programs that you think we could practice more in our own home churches?
All right, I got to tell you, there's so many All right, this one happened in a Mexican prison, Tijuana, Mexico. All right, there's a prison there called La Mesa, cartel controlled prison, 5,000 men, Wild Wild West. We got 50 guys, and I don't even speak Spanish. They bring in these 50 brothers in this thing. They don't know why they're there. They're sitting out there just looking at me. But I've got a brother named Jesus who's my interpreter. So I brought Jesus with me. And so basically we got together and we spent a couple of days together, and through our interpreter, man, we worked. We had one of my books translated into Spanish, and it's called 40 Days to Freedom. And we went through this process together, and I saw the miracles happen with these guys. And these are the guys that you hear about on the news, okay? Cartel soldiers. And they're just people that got caught up in something that they never asked for. They didn't ask to be born in Tijuana. They got snatched off the street when they were 10, put to work. Man, they got they fed their families by hustling for the cartels, and you grow up in it. And now all of a sudden you're in a prison where there's 15 or 20 packed in a cell 24/7. And they come out into the sun where we had our program out on the yard, and they find some hope. And hope is a dangerous thing in a prison because they protect their hearts, right? But here's what happened. One of the Pop brothers, he went to a little church service where there's a Catholic priest, and they gave every one of the brothers one of those little white and red mints and the clear plastic, the mints that we've seen since we were kids, which is like gold in a prison. And in American prisons, man, if you get a honey bun or you get some kind of sweet treat, you wouldn't believe how fast they eat it. They eat it real fast because they don't want to eat it slow. They just want to quickly get it down so that, that it's gone. And this brother put it in his pocket. He went back to his cell and he broke it into 20 pieces, little bitty pieces. And he gave every one of the guys in his cell one little piece so that everybody could taste the sweetness. And I'm sitting here looking at demonized, hated guys practicing kindness and compassion with one another because they had found something common, that they all want peace. And so I think if a cartel guy can care about all his buddies in a Mexican prison cell, how much more could we care for one another? Like really care, like to have that kind of relationship where we can talk about anything. During this pandemic, man, we're connecting more. I'm sitting here connecting with y'all from Atlanta. And so this is a time where maybe we can get creative and maybe we can start really having the kind of evangelism where we love somebody so hard that they just can't stand to be away. And then when they get to come and see all of us together, oh my gosh, and then you know what they feel. I felt y'all's congregation. So I don't know, that was kind of a rambling way to answer that question. But
I think it was a very much appreciated answer. I found it very impactful. That's very awesome. Thank you, Kit.
Well, thank you. Good question.
So hey, thank you so much, Kit, for sharing your heart and your experiences. So there are certain things that relate to the question that I'm about to ask you. For that cultural, with dealing with different people from different countries, different races, how were you able to connect with them? Because how hard it is for a lot of cultures to say, oh, here comes this white guy, he's not going to teach me, because cultural wise, even on prison, people a certain race, a lot of times they just go and hang out with people from their own race because they feel more comfortable.
Yeah.
And he became a guy, an outsider guy, a white guy who was going to teach him about God.
Yeah.
How will you give us some pointers on that? Because I'll be honest with you, sometimes I feel very insecure myself with certain cultures. You know what I'm talking about?
Yes, sir. Yeah. Great question. Thank you. I'll tell you the most recent one is the prison peace movement at Hancock State Prison was rocking, but we couldn't get the Latino brothers. You're right. In a lot of places in the United States, you might have Latin gangs on the streets that are enemies, but when they get inside, they all come together. So when they're doing their time, they all band together. And so They don't play with anybody else. It's for protection. And so I couldn't get, my Hispanic brothers on board. And so we invited the number one and the number two guy, and I sat with them and I just introduced myself. They had heard about everything. I just wanted to, but I said, listen, I need you guys to help me understand your world, because we can't do this without you. I mean, you guys are a very powerful part of this thing, and I need you here, but I don't want to disrespect you. So I need to know, in your world, can you help me? What would it take to bring you to the table? And I understand, and I love the Latin culture has embraced me. I spent so much time in Tijuana. I was there 40 times over a 12-month period, and they embraced me and loved me. I saw hospitality and festive. I mean, just a beautiful culture. I fell in love with it. There was a lot of things about the Latin culture that I wish we had, that we don't have. And so I appealed to his honor, and I said, I would never disrespect, but help me know what I can do, to have y'all be a part. And when a man feels respected, it changes a man. That's what we need. We need respect. And I feel like when you respect someone and humble yourself, but there was a young brother, and he happened to be Black, he happened to be young, and he happened to be Muslim, and he was the leader of the Muslims. In the prison system, Islam can be a gang more than it is a religion, but there are definitely pure Muslims in prisons, but usually there is a gang where, it's a very powerful group, a lot of numbers. And so here's a young brother, he's the Black leader of the Muslims, and I want him to be a part. But what I've learned to do, not as a technique, but just as a friend, is I made sure I knew who he was, and I went over and chatted him up, and then I would make sure, and, I'd kind of pull him in. We started, I joke around. I use humor a lot, and he's a very cool guy, and I like him a lot. So I pulled him aside and I said, listen, I'm going to be here every Thursday. I need you to teach me Islam, because I'm not going to be able to really, really help your people, your guys, if I don't understand. So I need you to teach me some things that I don't know. And he's like, I'll do that for you. And so sure enough, when I would get there on Thursdays, I would look for him and I'd say, hey, man, where's he at? I'd say, hey, come here, bro. I said, what you got for me today? Drop something on me. Give me something I don't know about Islam. And he became the teacher, but then he started asking me questions. Well, I wrote a book called 40 Days of Prayer, and I brought it just for him. And I said, listen, I need to ask something real special. And he's like, what can I do? I said, this is a book that I wrote, and it's a miracle journey, 40 Days of Prayer. And what if we agree on Abraham? We all come from Abraham, Christian, Muslim, Jew. I said, would you do this with me 40 days in a row? And I need you to do it through the eyes of a Muslim brother. And then I need to let me know what you think. Is this something that your men would be willing to do? Because, man, it's built for anybody that's seeking God. He said, man, I would be honored to do that. And so then when I would get there on Thursdays, man, he's looking for me. He can't wait to see me. And so he's coming over and say, hey, listen, I want to talk about what I learned. And I'm going to tell you what I think. And finally, by the end of it, I said, write a paper from a Muslim perspective about this 40 Days of Prayer journey. And it's all around Jesus. And so instead of trying to, I don't know, I mean, that's my method, is be curious, passionately curious in the other person, and let them teach you things. What if we brought that into our evangelism? What if we said, man, teach me about how you see God? It melts pride away. And all of a sudden you become the other. Just like Paul said, I've become all things to all men in order that I might win some, to the Jew, to the Greek. I think if there would have been Muslims, he would have said to the Muslim, I become a Muslim. They've invited me into their Jummah services. They don't invite Christians into a Jummah service, but they do me because I respect their religion. And then they start getting very interested in a Jesus that maybe they haven't seen. So I don't know. That was the long way to answer that one.
All right, man. Hey, thank you so much. That was amazing. It's all about heart.
Thank you so much.
Hey, Kit, how does a 50-year-old guy in Portland, Oregon, who doesn't have any experience with this but has a definite interest, what would be a first step for starting out in something like this, getting involved in the prisons because of compassion?
Yeah, yeah. Now I know this is a good way to do it, but I stumbled into it. When I was in that, please just let me be a hired hand. I started working with Ben Barnett. You guys, I bet a lot of y'all probably know Ben. Ben's an Atlanta guy. We came up together, great friend. He brought me under his wing when I was wounded and I was trying to come back and find my voice. And this was some of the most amazing advice. Well, it was a charge because I'm insecure. I'm like, man, I'm scared to preach, too much pain, and that was hard. And bringing my wife that they didn't know into this. And I said, what do you want me to do? I mean, I'm not going to be teaching the kids. I'm not going to be teaching the marrieds. What exactly you want me to do? And Ben said, and I quote, we want you to go out into the world, find out what God's up to, and come back and tell us. That's amazing. So you know what I did? I said, I'm gonna go preach at the homeless shelter. So I went down to this big homeless shelter downtown and I showed up and I said, hey, I would like to serve. They said, we're all full. And I said, just let me volunteer. They said, really? We got no more spots. And I said, is there any time during the day that I can do something? And they said, 4:00 on Tuesdays, but everybody's sleeping. Nobody's gonna come. And so I said, I'll be there. So me and my Bible showed up and there were 3 brothers sitting there. And it was me and 3 brothers and I had a pulpit and I preached. And it was me preaching again. And so I'm preaching to 3 homeless guys. And the next week they brought some friends and they brought some friends until we filled that joker up. And we had this choir. I mean, it was just a bunch of homeless brothers making beautiful noise. But here's what I learned. A lot of them have done time. A lot of them have been in prison before and they hit the streets because they got nowhere to go. So that was my first taste at prison ministry, was going loving some brothers on the streets that used to be inside. And it gave me a heart. And then once I fell in love, I ain't afraid. Perfect love drives out fear. You fall in love with somebody, you're not afraid of them anymore. Right. And all of a sudden they're not a homeless person anymore. They're your friend. We had all these homeless guys coming to church and I'd be preaching and they stay up all night long and they'd come into the church. And this is a nice church, all these brothers, beautiful sisters, Ben's church. And all of a sudden we had rows of homeless guys that were out there. And one time we had my brother, Isaiah, he's this homeless brother, and he was wasted. And I was preaching and he kept going, come on, bro. And he's making it. I'm like, Isaiah, really, it's okay, bro. And everybody's kind of giggling. But it was like first century stuff. So that was a simple step. Go serve the homeless, feed them, love them, make friends with them. And God will kind of start, I don't know, something will pop up.
Okay. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
You are inspiring, Kit. It's you make me want to do something great. It's amazing what you've done, and it's so, and not, I mean, to say this, it's amazing what you've done, and yet it's so simple that you just went where God took you, and on your end of it, you've been fearless. There must have been sometimes it was a little fearful. I mean, even besides being under the stairs with Psycho.
I got trapped in a van in Tijuana that I thought was a taxi and it wasn't.
What?
I did. I was by myself and Jeff Wadstrom, awesome brother in San Diego. We'd go down, work in Tijuana. He'd drop me off. I'd come across the border. He'd come around, pick me up. That's the way we always did it. And I got stuck at the border and I was ticked. I was hungry. We were late. It was a long line. And he said, texted me, he said, just go down to Otay. And so catch a taxi, go down to Otay. I'll meet you there. It's a smaller crossing. And so I'm looking for a taxi driver. I'm coming up out of this tunnel. And all of a sudden I look like a mark because nobody looks like me down there. And so I'm looking around, all of a sudden this dude catches my eyes and I said, are you a taxi? And he's like, and I was like, no, really, are you a taxi? And he's like, yeah, man, we'll get you across. And I said, no, I don't want to get across. Can you take me to Otay? Yeah, come on, we'll get you across. So I'm like, whatever, just get me out of here. And so his partner rolls in with me. And so we go up the hill, we took around and we walk up and there's a white panel van. And I was like, is that a taxi? And he said, yeah. And I said, you got a little swipe today? I got to guess, can I? And he's like, yeah, come on, we got you. And so he opens the thing. I jump in, they get in the front seat, they close the door. I look around and it's not a taxi at all. And so we're rolling. And I honestly, I thought, man, I just got, there's a lot of kidnappings going on in Tijuana. But that's how I got myself out. And I that's a kind of another story. I talked myself out of there, and it was, it got kind of interesting, and, it got kind of intense.
Are you able to stay in touch with your kids, or are you able to stay in touch with the brothers in prison? What's right now during this time? What are you doing with your ministry, with the people that I know you love and feel responsible for? What's that like?
It's heartache, man. I can't see them, and I can't communicate with them. I mean, I've got my dearest friend. He was the first guy I met in the first prison. He's been bounced around the system in Georgia. He ended up at Hancock. He's the one that requested me, and it was a reunion. If there was one guy in the 2 million men that are locked up in the land of the free, if I could get one guy out, it's him. And God opened the door and let me get, his name's SB. He's one of the strongest, wisest, toughest, fearless dudes. He's a man's man. He's strong, but he is brilliant. He's like a modern day Mandela. And I love him like a brother. I know his family in Jersey City. I've preached in his dad's little church. And it was like one of the most beautiful things. Every Thursday, I got to go see my friend SB. And then all of a sudden, this thing happened. The doors were shut. And now they're confined in a place where if the virus gets in there, they can't get away. There's no social distancing. There's no quarantine. They're just locked down. And so he and I figure out a way to communicate. There's ways that you can do it legally, but it's hard because I can't see him. And that's one of the powerful things about prison ministry is we don't get to do this, man. It's like if you don't go see them, they don't get to see anybody. They don't have anybody. And I think one of the biggest thing God did for me is he gave me a ministry that nobody could see. All my ministry, Steve, all the years, I mean, shoot, I learned so much from you. I had so much arrogance that my preaching was seen by everybody. And it was something that filled me. It was intoxicating. And then God gave me a ministry where nobody gets to see. It's like my best work over the last 12 years, the best work I've ever done preaching will never be seen, but just those brothers. He also gave me one where I can't have an agenda. They can't join my church. They can't come to a service. They can't tithe. There's no agenda. It's just pure love. But there was a lot of my love had agenda back in the day. Maybe it was good agenda. You love somebody so they'll come to church, and love them so they'll study the Bible, love them so they'll get baptized, and love them so they'll be a brother forever. And they're not bad agendas, but it was kind of a transactional thing sometimes. And now God gave me this ministry where it's love without agenda. They can't do anything for me, but they do because they love so hard. And then the last thing is, I never had to work well with anybody other than our thing. If we wanted to do something, we did. We raised money, staffed it, ran it. Well, this ministry, you can't get into a prison. And to Carl, what you need to do is find you a prison ministry that already is going into prisons and go and ask them if they need a volunteer, and then just go serve with them. And, you'll find that there's some amazing people out there that go to different churches that are serving, the least of these. And so I learned to ride in with other organizations that were already going so that I could get to my mission field. So I rolled with Pentecostals and Baptists and Catholics and Methodists and Episcopals, and I went into ashrams and cathedrals and synagogues and sweat lodges, and it's amazing. So he did those three things for me, which changed my ministry forever.
In situations like that, people probably don't care what franchise you are if you're willing to go into those places. I know that right now, I can't pay attention here and look at Facebook and everything. So I don't know how many folks are listening right now, and it's being recorded. And of course, everybody knows the way Facebook Live works. It'll be on there for perpetuity or whatever. But I know over the week we've had a number of folks that have just sort of stumbled by or came by and heard things going on. And Kit, I think I know there's a lot of people that are just real scared right now. and there's something, it's a scary thing. But I also know that there's a lot of people making promises to God. God, when I get out of this, I want to do something great. I want to make my life count. And I think you've already maybe answered the question that Carl answered, that Carl asked. But right now, with people that are listening to you and are feeling like I am and are feeling inspired and saying, I want to do something. There's one thing. If someone wants to help in a prison, there's already a number of folks that are trying, and it might be that you know somebody in prison or know somebody who knows somebody, and you can start by just going to visit them or to go with the group. Is there anything else that you would like to say before we close to folks listening in who I think there's a lot of big decisions that people are going to be making while we've got this time, a lot of time for soul searching and thinking, and a lot of people praying like they've never prayed before. Is there any other little advice you'd like to give somebody about how to, because it can be daunting, right? I want to do something great. I don't know where to start. It's like someone saying, I want to write a book and I don't know how to start the first sentence. I want to paint a picture. What am I going to paint? I want to do something great for God, like Kit. Where do I start? Any advice for them?
Yeah, I think that I need to do things that scare me a little bit. And I don't mean scare me like go hang out with gangsters. I'm saying something that gets me out of my comfort zone. And, the heart knows what it wants. I mean, that's the dream is in the heart. And if you just ask God, man, tell me what it is that's going to set me free. I want to do something great. Everything you just said, make it real to me. Give me an answer. Where do you want me to go? Who do you want me to serve? But I think if you can serve people I'm telling you, if love without agenda is so powerful. Jesus did not have an agenda. He loved because he was love. And it wasn't so that the other person would do anything. He just loved one person completely at a time, just one person completely at a time. And this is a time where people need that. And so I would say, man, pray to God, put somebody on my heart or in my path that I can love completely with absolutely no agenda. And then ask hopefully you ask questions to the Holy Spirit, like specific questions. I've got a little thing I'm doing in my devotionals now where it's questions for the Holy Spirit. And I'll ask him, what can I do today to be the best husband I can be and make my wife feel incredibly loved? And then I just leave it alone and wait for the answer. What can I do today to help my son be a great man? And then just don't even think about it the rest of the day. And all of a sudden, boom, it'll come. And the Holy Spirit, he's doing what you asked him to do. And so it's like, I need something great. I need to climb a mountain, slay a dragon, win a maiden. I gotta do something. What can I do today? What can be my great thing? Write it down and then just let the answer appear. I think the Holy Spirit, he wants to talk to us throughout the day, like a real relationship. Give me an idea. Give me a suggestion. Give me a sign. I love asking for signs and then going looking for them. So that's kind of a real general thing, but I think it's a different thing for everybody. Your heart knows what it wants. Why don't you ask God during this quarantine to make it very apparent? And then I think once it happens, like I keep having, this isn't a long story, but when this whole thing happened and the quarantine was evident, and I'm like, my whole ministry just went away, man. I got no prison, schools, corporate gigs, churches aren't even meeting. What do I do? Small business loan, hope that comes. And so I was trying to figure out how we're going to do this. And all of a sudden, it was like we were laying upstairs. It was late at night watching TV, about to go to sleep. And I was like, what do you want me to do? And the answer was so clear. He said, just preach Jesus every morning. And I was like, whoa, preach Jesus I'm talking about on Facebook Live. And so I was like, it was such a big thought. And here's what I got next. He said, I want you to love people more than you care about where your needs are going to be met. You love people. I'll meet the needs. And so it was like, okay, I've got to preach every morning. And so all of a sudden I just grabbed my phone, reached out, and I said, hey gang, tune in tomorrow, Facebook Live. I'm gonna start my first of 40 days of sermons in a row. So I called it 40 sermons in 40 days. But the reason I'm telling you that is he gave me an answer, but then I had to blast it because I had to make myself accountable. Because if I'd have gotten the next day, I don't know, I'd have been like, that's a little crazy. I don't know if I can do 40 sermons in 40 days. But we're on day 25. And it's got me rocking because it's a great thing for me to do, get up and have to preach every morning. But if I wouldn't have asked the question, the answer wouldn't have clearly arrived. But then if I hadn't have made the move and went ahead and busted myself, I'd have talked myself out of it. So when God gives you your big thing that you're going to roar back in out of the quarantine from, I would probably share it with some people so that, they know what you're going to do.
Commit yourself. Yeah. Commit yourself. Well, there you have it, everybody. You can, if you're not already following Kit on Facebook, follow him. He's preaching Jesus every day, and you certainly shared a ton with us tonight. And I could talk to you all night. In fact, if you'd hang around for a little while when we close, but why don't we go ahead and call it for tonight? Come back tomorrow night, everybody. Mike Tolliver is going to be with us here on The Brothers Show. And hearing Kit tonight, I've got an idea for some things that maybe we can do next week. But Carl, why don't you play us out? Let's call it, and then hang around for just a minute. Good night, everybody.
Love y'all.
The Brothers Show. The Brothers Show. The Brothers Show. Tonight.